forward to today. And so I wanted to just discuss that with you as we've gone over the budget many times, and I just wanted to say the assumptions that are built into the 2022 budget are as follows. The 3% merit for all staff based on their anniversary date, the 0% for health insurance. Thankfully, we were able to do that, which was a huge blessing to us. 0% cost of living, but that was what the stipends were for, to help some of that and offset that. So that's where we stand today. We do have the governmental funds, and the general fund is at a balanced budget with $750,000 capital included in that. So I just stand before you today. We're asking for you to pass the 2022 recommended budget as is set before you. And we know, this is a caveat, because I will say this, because I'm sure all of you will ask that question. We know that there's work to do. There is work for all of us to do, to look at the revenues and figure out what is sustainable for this city. Right now, as it stands, 2022 is balanced, but what about 23 through 24 and 25 and 26? What are our sustainable options? And that comes together with the Finance Committee and the Board of Aldermen and talking in depth about what are our long-term solutions, additional revenue sources, and or using the priority-based budgeting model to look at some of the expenditures and the programs that we have that don't meet the needs of the community, and looking at possibly reallocating those. So that is the discussion. I'm happy to answer any questions, but staff does recommend approval of this. Thank you.
Are there any comments from members in the chambers? Any? Oh, go ahead, Jim.
Your Honor, members of the board, Jonas Argis, and today I'm representing or standing before you as the Executive Director of the Taney County Partnership. And I know that this is not the ideal time, or for that matter, even appropriate, but I do serve at the pleasure of and answer to a board of roughly 40 investors. And we had our board meeting on Tuesday of this week, and I know some discussions were had with a couple of board members as well as the mayor, and it was suggested to me that I come and share with you the correspondence that's in front of you, which was a request for a renewed letter of intent from the city, as well as consideration for a possible increase in the investment to the Taney County Partnership. The partnership was formed roughly 10 years ago. City of Branson has been at the level of funding consistently, and we appreciate that. We've had several members, both on the public sector side and private sector side, increase their investment level over the years. Excuse me. And hence the request for consideration. So again, I know this is probably not the best time to bring this before you, so I would request that this may be given some consideration, if not in this cycle, in future cycles. And I've attached my business card to that email and the letter of intent. If anybody has any questions or concerns or would like more information, I'd be happy to answer those at any time. So with that, I would promise the mayor I'd be brief, so I would stand for any questions.
So Jonas, I believe the reason you're here is what's in our budget for the Taney County Partnership, I believe, is $10,000.
Correct, and that's been historically the amount.
Were you asking for additional funds?
Yes, in the email, we requested consideration to increase it by 50% or 100%.
And you know where we are with our budget, right?
Absolutely.
We're getting down to tough cuts. But I also believe that the board is very conscious of the monies that we do spend. Some areas we actually get a return on investment through increased employees, increased tax revenues. So I know part of the discussion was the work that you do at the partnership, how that is directly affecting city limits of Branson, generating new jobs, increased taxes. And so what I heard was that was the thrust of why you're here,
Okay?
right?
Yes,
So without going into the weeds,
sure.
keep it a big picture, if you would. Share with us what the benefits to our city if we would increase the funds.
I think the 40,000-foot view of our own budgetary discussions are that for 2022, we are onboarding a business retention and expansion specialist that will go and meet with businesses throughout the county. I think the ROI is more tied to more of the headline type of stuff, new projects, capital investment, jobs created, which on that side of the house, we assist any and all businesses or individuals or groups that are looking to invest capital or create jobs in all of Taney County. The list that I included in the email is a pretty good group, probably going back to 2015 or earlier, of projects that we have had some level of assistance with, and those were all inside the city limits of Branson. The jobs created to the right, those are an estimate. I did not call every employer and say, hey, how many jobs did you end up creating? Those are estimate based off what we were told in the beginning and once they were opened. So that's a rough estimate. And then there's a couple at the bottom that are in process right now. So one significant project that we're heavily involved with is the redevelopment of the Stafford, Caravel, and Gateway parcels. And so Branson's Nantucket is spearheading that project and going through their due diligence to see what type of attraction/experience that would fit their business model as well as be good for the market. And as we've been advocating for over the last several years is along the corridor, we need to keep in consideration what is highest and best use and income or revenue producing properties or projects. So I think on the project side, that's more where I have most of the hands-on stuff with. I think the other piece that's very critical to our community is the work that Izzy Hughes does with the workforce development side of the house. Heather Hardinger used to do that, if you will recall her being here, but Izzy has done a great job of taking up the reins once we came back from COVID last year. So she heads up all those programs. So, prior to 2021, we were on a pretty good pace of if not permanent residents, but supplemental labor via, Bridge USA, which is the J1 program, which we took over the management of the community support group. We had instituted a recruitment program from the island of Puerto Rico and had brought in over 1,000 seasonal employees for our employers starting in 2017. That had branched out into healthcare. So if you look at our 3-year action plan, there's three legs of the stool: business attraction and marketing, business retention and expansion, and workforce development. So that third leg, with the increase that we've talked about from not only proposed to our public sector, but also our private sector, is to make sure that we have the funds to onboard that specialist to get back to a team of 3. I don't think one of my board members here on my executive committee doesn't mind me sharing, but we are also, they just approved a budget that takes us dipping into our cash on hand to the tune of about $50,000, which is roughly, more than 30% of our actual budget. So that's again, more staff to do more programming to address the issues that we have in the community. One of those is housing. So that workforce development housing piece falls under all of us, not only just Izzy. So that's just a snippet of what we're doing.
So the workforce housing, and the vast majority of conversations I have about economic growth for our city, at the end of a long conversation, it keeps boiling down to workforce housing.
Where are they going to sleep?
It's hard to attract in larger businesses when they either are informed or discover there's nobody here to work, right? So in a nutshell, can you share with us what you're doing to help us resolve our workforce housing issue?
Well, outside of continuing to advocate for the more developers, not even locally, but from out of the area, to consider developing, I call it affordable workforce starter. I don't care what we call it, but it has to match what the income levels and the earning capacity of our residents are compared to what the jobs are, right? So there's a whole slew of challenges when you look at cost of development, you know, how projects pencil, where that housing needs to be, and so on and so forth. But we recently had Holtz Builders in the area 2-3 weeks ago. They're headquartered out of the Wisconsin Dells, and they are expert at seasonal housing, specifically for the Bridge USA J1 community. So we brought them in for a site visit. They spent 2.5, 3 days here. We looked at some publicly owned property. We had meetings with individual employers that could replicate a model that Kalahari Resorts does in the Dells, where they have built their own dorm-type facility to house their seasonal workers as well as full-time workers. You know, constantly looking at available properties and the potential of, you know, multifamily developers out of the Springfield market, or, you know, even local developers that understand and get the need, but we always get back to, does it pencil, right? To be able to, and I'll just say, it's a very difficult endeavor to try to convince a local developer to do affordable housing. If you look on their return, when they can go out in the other areas of the county and Stone County, possibly with a lake view, and build property that they can get a way bigger return on and serve the visitor community. So again, developers like to make money, and it's hard to make those types of developments pencil.
Yeah. So I'm going down this line, and I'm taking the time of this meeting.
Sure.
Because this whole book is affected by workforce housing.
Yep.
Any other board members have any questions for Jonas? So Jonas's ask is, right now we have budgeted 10,000, and that's what's in our budget today. So Jonas is asking for 200,000. No.
We take it.
Yeah. So Jonas is,
I tried.
Jonas is here to pretty much explain to us that what he's saying is, if he would be able to receive more dollars from our city, he believes that he can directly affect improving our workforce housing, which is a cornerstone to our limited growth abilities. I've heard a statement, and would you confirm it, that we, this year, put COVID in the past, next year, going into 2022, we could have a number of J1 workers here, and what's preventing us from having the workforce in Branson is there's no place for them to live.
Correct.
Is that true?
Yes. So I think if you look, our best year, we were gaining incrementally at a pretty good clip up through 2019. So if I shouldn't go by memory, but for the sake of argument or discussion, back in 2014 and 15, we had roughly 300 to 350 J1 kids in the market or during the summer season. By the time 2019 was over, we had over 800, plus another couple of hundred that were in the internship program, right? So just as a point of comparison, the Dells, which is, they host roughly 4 to 4.5 million visitors per year. They host over 3,500 J1 kids a year. Wow. And the reason they're able to do that is they've solved the housing issue. You know, they had issues with extended stay properties. They implemented programs to mitigate that. Holtz Builders, like I mentioned just a minute ago, they built Hiawatha Commons, they built dorms for Kalahari and Olympus. So they figured out that issue from the seasonal side, right? So they have a business model that they can execute with 17 weeks out of the year of occupancy through those J1 kids, right? So in 2019, with Plato's Cave coming online, our inventory to house those students is much greater than what we're looking at going into 2022. Where we sit today, we cannot host 800 J1 kids, or it's Bridge USA, formerly known as J1. It's going to take me a while to get going on that. But we would not be able to take that number of students for 22 because we don't have the same level of inventory. And the simple fact is not only Plato's Cave, but also King's Quarters and a couple other properties have transitioned over to a 12-month out of the year leasing program, which eliminates, then obviously you can't have kids come in and rent for 3 months out of the year. So we are going to try to supplement that a little bit with hotel properties. I think hoteliers are in a strategic position where they have, if in 19 and 20, they're holding rooms out of inventory because they don't have people to clean them, well, you can put 2, 3, or 4 J1 kids in a room. Now, is it ideal that they sleep at the same property that they work? Probably not. But if everybody's desperate like I think they are, or they have been, hoteliers will have an advantage because they have built-in housing, and that could help them, for 22. But to answer your question, no, we won't. We will be limited in the number. We will have more visa students wanting to come to this market than we can host because we don't have the housing.
That is a loud statement.
Now, you said in the Dells they had the same type of issues with the extended stays and stuff.
They used to.
And they cleaned that up?
Yep.
I mean, and then they've also solved, now they can accompany all these J1 workers. I mean, how can we look at that model and
Well, we went on a community leadership visit to the Dells 4 or 5 years ago. I think Karen Best was mayor. We brought back language of ordinances on how they had dealt with their challenges with extended stays. I'm not going to recite those from memory because I'd be way off, but I know that either, somebody in the city has those, or we might have them, Monica might have them at the chamber, but we had those, right? And that was their way of dealing with it. So that was a separate issue probably from the employers also understanding what they could do with the Bridge USA students. Now, granted, they have more of a stable year-round economy, right? Because they have the mega indoor water parks, which cover the wintertime. They also have a casino up there that's year-round. So they've also done a good job of tapping into that student visa program 12 months out of the year, where we're, 4, at best 5 months out of the year. Now, when we get to a more rounded out year-round economy, we will also then be able to get year-round J1 kids from the Southern Hemisphere because, their summer break is our wintertime, so.
well, I wish we could find that verbiage and see if, if they solved it, it'd be nice to
Yeah, and again,
peek into that.
Yeah, Alderman Cooper, I know that we brought that language back, and when I get back to the office, I'll ask Monica if she can't track it down, and if not, I'm sure it's on their website.
Oh, yeah,
So,
it's interesting.
Real quick, Jonas. Alderman Skanes and myself spent our Friday night listening to the MHDC where they were talking about taking comments on 2022 projects. So I know there was a couple of them. One of them was Branson Manor, which really wouldn't come into play, but are there
that's the rehab of the 55 plus, correct?
Exactly,
Yep.
yeah. So were there shovel-ready projects that were presented during that 3-hour session?
Yeah, so I came in late on that deal. I did not get to hear the entire public hearing. And prior to the list coming out, I was only aware of 3 projects in Taney County where there's actually 5, and 4 of those are inside the city limits of Branson. 1 is the 55 plus, the Oak Manor rehab, and then there's 3 new construction projects. And the other one is Sycamore Springs 2 over in Hollister by MRE Capital. A spade's a spade, right? That process is political. It's highly unlikely that Taney County will get more than 1, And if we do get more than one, I would highly unlikely that Branson gets more than one, right? So at best, I hope to get at least the one in Branson and one in Hollister. Forsyth got awarded one in the last cycle, Woodlands 2 project that broke ground over there not too long ago. But it's great to have 5 projects under consideration, but we won't get all of them.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, that's why you and I and we others, we've had discussion as I've addressed the Jonas's group. I'm on the executive committee as well. And our problem that we have is we have no bullets in our economic gun to do this thing outside of hopefully will of the community. I was a little disappointed in the MHDC meeting. This feud that's going on between Cherry and Dan may endanger that project over there. That needs to be put to rest. We've had enough of it, just clearly had enough. We don't need something that's going to cost us 150, 175, or 200 rooms over a feud. I mean, let's just get to the bottom of it. That's why I agreed when you called me to take this thing on, is that Stan and I were to meet this afternoon with some other staff to discuss what we can do, and I called Jonas and asked him what sort of resources we could utilize on their side. There's no money in this budget to do something like that. We just can't make it out of the thin air. And for us to do something on workforce housing, we're going to have some economic incentives for these builders to do something like Jonas said. They can build a house in Stone County and make $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 versus investing in all this. It's just more complex, and I don't see us getting anything done till 23, 24 on it. It just takes time to build stuff.
Yeah, and Your Honor, for the sake of time, and I know you've got pressing things in front of you today, but maybe it'd be best if I coordinate with the clerk and I get on a future agenda, and we can hit on 2 or 3 topics that we can get more in detail of, or I'm happy to meet individually or by twos, whatever we can do to appease the rules and regs to talk about all these things. Because I mean, I'm in it every day. So
That's a great suggestion, because right now, what we're faced with is here's
Absolutely.
a finished product. But a budget amendment, right, if we hear more, well, how it directly affects us is when we don't have enough workers, and I'm going to pick on restaurants. A lot of the restaurants are either half open, right, so half the restaurant is unoccupied seats, or they're shortening their hours, or they're closing days off. That directly affects our revenue, right?
Yep. And I'll reiterate, the request that it's not just an increase from the city of Branson. There's other public sector entities that we're in the process of requesting increases from. Every renewal that goes out to the business sector, I request that they consider either a 25 or a 10% just to keep building. And this specifically is to add that third person to take on one specific segment of our mission to allow for us to do more programming and do the program that we're doing better.
So, thank you. We'll follow up with that, and Jamie, we'll talk about this at another time, but Jonas, thank you so much.
I didn't mean to take all that time.
No, thank you for coming in, Jonas.
Thanks, Jonas.
Any other members in the audience wishing to speak? Any questions or comments from the board? Wow. I have a few. This budget book that we were handed out previously, are there any changes in this book that we're going to be asked to vote on today?
The only change is the summary page on page 9. I think I mentioned it last time. We have since revised it, but we're not allowed to bring the revision today. So what I'm going to say is just the water and sewer rate increase. So on page 9, on the summary up there under the water and sewer rate increase, I believe that you actually passed the 2 and 7% instead of the 5 and 7%. So that's just in summary form. The numbers still stand corrected. It was just this summary page that needs to be changed. So it's really just at the very top where it says the water rate increase of 5% is actually 2%, and we have the revision today. However that needs, I'm not sure if we substitute one page, or if we can just put the whole brand-new thing in there, and we've got a revision on the revision date. However that needs to happen, totally fine. But just to make you aware, page 9, the water rate is actually and was passed at 2% and not 5%, so that's the change that's needed. I think it's, yeah, page 9.
Did I pass it, Jamie? I'm not.
I think so. If
not
you
seeing
keep going
page
back
numbers,
up, right. Keep going. There you go, right there.
Thank you.
See, this is the revised one where we've got the 2 and the 7. Your magazine that's before you right now says 5 and 7. And so we just wanted to make sure that you were all aware that we are adjusting that and making that change. But that is the only thing. The summaries are still, we've gone through them. They are still correct. The general fund, those funds are still balanced before you with the assumptions that you see here. And so our recommendation is to pass this based on recommendation. And when we start those conversations, and if you in the future see changes or amendments that need to be made, we do budget amendments for next year as we come up across these things. So like, I'll use Jonas, for example, his request. We have the 10,000 in there today, but just as an example, if we go ahead and pass this budget as recommended, and you all believe that the ROI that he is saying will come to us, say we do another 5,000, we'll do a budget amendment for 5,000 because we'll see the increase in revenue to offset that. That would kind of be the idea of moving forward in the future, just so that we can get this budget passed, so that we don't have to revert back to the 21, and then move forward. Any changes you all see, you let us know, and we will look at where the expenditures need to be changed to offset that cost, or what revenues are coming in that might offset that and help that structure.
Okay, on that point, when this was first presented, we went through this, I asked the question that, was this just a typo? It should have said 2 instead of 5, or was the calculations based on 5?
Yes, and I went back after I said I needed to go back and review that. It was just the summary page because we had gone back and already adjusted the revenue. If you look at the water level rate, it is 2% and not 5%,
Okay,
just
so
for
it wasn't the
clarification.
calculations.
It was just this summary page, so I did clarify that, yes, sir. You know, we may get more revenue than that, which would be fantastic. I'm hopeful for that, but I just wanted to make sure that change was mentioned.
What else, something else that was brought up
Sure.
was the reserves. We're looking for the reserves in all the different accounts to reflect what our statute says we need to maintain. And then if we were choosing to increase that reserve to make fiscal decisions, that would be a separate line item.
Yes, we did not change the summaries there, but you can see that all your reserves are at 30%. The code says 20%. That 30% is just a benchmark for us. So you can see that we have more than enough to cover the code of 20%, but we can make that visual change if you want us to. Yes, but I apologize, we did not change the summaries as to that form, but I wanted you to be aware that we have, you can see more than the 30% reserve intact with this budget.
The reason I was asking for the 20% is, excuse me, the more I get into our budget and our long-term and the trend we're on, I would like to be able to work with what our real numbers are, because, I mean, we're gonna have to make changes, right? 'Cause
For sure.
I think everybody agrees that this isn't sustainable, and
Correct. Yes, sir, and you can see, even above the 30%, the difference over above the 30% is that $4.2 million that you have. Again, I will just mention the one-time versus the ongoing. As we stand today with this 2022 budget, the biggest issue we have is the ongoing, the balancing of the ongoing operations versus the ongoing revenues. And we've talked about that in detail, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
yeah. We also discussed putting our investment accounts online. Are we in the process of doing that?
Yes, sir, we are in the
Okay.
process, and that will be brought before the Finance Committee in January. And also, we're going to bring our investor, we typically do that once a year, bring him down and have you speak to him. And we have those reports, it's just putting it in a summary form for you, so we are in the process of doing that, certainly.
Thank you. Something else I'd like to bring up, and there again, I'm looking at big picture. The total revenue that comes into the city is 65 million. Is that close?
Give or take, yes, sir.
But every year, when we go through our budget, we only address the 20% from general fund, from the operating account. This book doesn't say 65 million, we're talking
It's
about
because it's
20
by
million.
fund. Yeah, we break it down by fund. So the 65 million would be over all funds in total, but we break it down by fund and show you it by fund. We do that for a specific purpose because that's how we have to do our accounting. Now, at the end of the year, with the comprehensive annual financial report that we do a government-wide statement, then you'll be able to see that. That's how we calculate that. If you want me to represent it differently, I can certainly do that. But you'll still have to see it by fund. But if you want me to do some kind of a summary report that totals it all, you just got to keep in mind when we're looking at that you have business type activity that is structured differently and can be used in different ways versus your governmental funds that is structured differently. And then you have your general fund, which is your unreserved fund, and then you have all those special revenue funds that are also operate differently. So you just got to keep that in mind. If we show you it in total, just keep in mind that in total, those revenues are very specifically set aside for different purposes. So you can't just lump it all into one pool and say, hey, we're going to use this for this purpose. Does that make sense? Okay, I just wanted to clarify. I can show it. However, you all say, hey, Jamie, I want to see this report or this report. No problem. We'll do our best to make the report. But I just want you to be aware that certain funds have different uses, so we can't just put it all in one pot and say, hey, we're going to use this for this purpose.
No.
I know you understand that. I was just going to let you know.
Yeah, I do understand that. But there again, what I clearly see is we need to make big changes. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. I think the long term is the most important struggle that we're up against, and we've talked about this in detail, but the growing cost of things, not just for the city, but for the entire country, the inflation rates that are just going crazy. Our revenues are not going to keep up with the rising costs. So then the question is, what's next? What do we do next? So the answer is we either increase our revenue or we take a hard look at our expenditures and that priority-based budgeting model and look at the programs that don't meet the needs that the community told us was important and start dropping some of those services that aren't as important to our community, taking that money and reallocating it for the purpose that does meet the needs of the community. I think we have some options, but I think what you said, I think at the last meeting about really getting together and diving down in maybe after the first of the year and start looking at how we can make recommendations to improve that ongoing. I think that's the best solution for 23, 24, 25, and
Yeah.
ongoing.
If you would you just make sure that after we get past January 1st, that we get directly back into this?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It will take extra meetings and those
Sure it
kind
will.
of things. And the Finance Committee, you've been a part, we've all talked about that, and everybody, I think, is on board to help us fix that. So yes, sir, we'll send out an email for suggestions on different meetings and special meetings, and see what everybody's involved in, because I think it will be a great work effort for the community as a whole.
Boy, I really agree with that. Any other board members have any questions or comments?
Mayor, when you say need some big change, I mean, are you talking, I mean, tightening of the belt and really looking at things through a different lens when we, I mean, is that what you're, I mean?
Actually, yeah, that's a good question. What I would like to see is, and I'm just gonna say, start off with a clean canvas and look at things differently. We know we can't keep doing what we've been doing. If that's a given, let's start with a clean canvas and we need, this book says, we need to make changes, or the next board, every year is gonna be a crisis. And every year, it's gonna get worse and worse and worse. Would you agree with that, Jamie?
Absolutely, and what I would encourage, it's funny that you said that, because the motto of priority-based budgeting model is looking at things through a new lens. And so that's what we have tried to do. Use that decision-making model, because the department heads, you know the cost of every program that we have. You know how it scores back to the community plan. I think the community plan might be the key. If you're gonna update that community plan and go back and redo that, I don't know that answer. But that would be the key to say, okay, this is what this community right now says important. You go back and every program that we have, we rescore it. Not only the department heads rescore it, but the peer groups rescore it. You come together, you find that true score, then you know what every program that this city provides costs, and you know where they fall in terms of, is this program really important to the community? It didn't score that way based on this. If it's not, it's a difficult decision, but it's a decision-making model for a reason. Then it would be up to y'all to say, okay, let's not do this program anymore. Just, I'll use an example. Okay, that program cost $200,000. Let's not use that program anymore, because our community has already said that's not really important anymore. That's something we did 60 years ago that no longer is beneficial to us today. Now you have that $200,000, and you have to say, okay, we may not have any more revenue right now, but we have this $200,000 because we're stopping doing that. Where do we want to put it? Do we want to do a new program that our community has said is important? Or do we want to add this money to something that's flourishing that our community loves and further enhance it? That is really that decision-making model tool, and if we use it right, I love that you said through a new lens, because that is the motto behind it. And it's really amazing once you get in and look at it.
Well, when COVID hit for my business at the theater, I mean, you know, you get into a habit of this is the way we do it, and we're gonna do it
Yes.
this way next year, and we're gonna do this because we know it works. And then
right.
COVID hit, and we thought, okay, we're gonna have to throw out the playbook and write new plays, because it's all different now.
That's right.
You know, so we really had to try to get creative on ways to create revenue just inside our facility there. You know, so I think that's important that, you know, you look at it from a total different aspect.
Yeah.
And I love that. Thank you for saying that.
And Jamie, on your point that you just made, as I've been looking at previous budgets, what appears to me is what we keep chipping away is quality of life for our residents. Neighborhood parks, things we do for our community. I know we're not a business, we're a government. We need to take care of certain things. Stan told some of our first and second graders that when they hit that little flush button on their toilet, it's part of our job. But let me just leave it at, looking at it through a different lens needs to happen. And so thank you for carrying the reins on that, and let's not wait until
I mean, we're all public servants, so I think it's hugely important. And I love those policy questions that y'all really liked that we mentioned. That's what that goes back to, is how do you revise that and how do you work towards that? So that's a great discussion.
I have a question. With our mayor asking for the investment accounts to be put online, so that will be transparent. Our special funds, all of our special fund accounts, are those also listed with clarity so that anyone picking it up could read it and
Those
find
are,
out
yes, ma'am.
where the money's coming from, what's going into those accounts?
Yes, those are on the income statements, and those are what we go through with Finance Committee, and all funds are out there, and they should be reported by month. So certainly, if we need to do something different, no problem, but we do that balance sheet, and we do the cash by fund report that connects the balance sheet and the income statement. And I would say for the public, the income statement is probably something that is readily, more easily to understand because it's just revenue coming in and expenditures going out and the end. And it also compares it back to the last previous 2 years. So it would give them an idea of where we sit at that point in time. But is that what you were asking?
Well, I guess I'm a little confused, being the newer person here, but general fund dollars and special fund accounts, those dollars are separate, correct?
Yes, ma'am. So you have the general fund for government finance. General fund is the only unreserved fund.
And it's unreserved, unrestricted, so if any of those funds go into an account that is restricted.
And we do a lot of subsidies out of the general fund. So we do a park subsidy, we pay out to the convention center, we do the public safety subsidy, and we do a lot of those subsidies out of the general fund. And then the special revenue funds are the revenues or the tax dollars that are passed specifically for that purpose. We have to set up a new fund and account for it strictly like that. So the monies can come out of the general fund and go to another fund because it's unrestricted. But those special revenues have specific rules and regulations that we have to follow, certainly.
Because they're audited differently?
Yes, they're all audited individually based on the definition behind what those funds are for, certainly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No other questions or comments?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor, because I think we need to be looking at this budget with a scalpel, because as we looked at the budget this year, I don't know how much further we can go back and cut. Obviously, we can cut some things. It winds up deciding whether it's going to come out of police or fire or water or sewer or parks and recreation. They all have names. And I know it's not part of the budget process, but it's part of the stuff we've talked about dealing with the ticket reseller and online sales issue. We can't continue to ignore that, and that we're down roughly 15,000 theater seats and roughly 2,500 hotel and motel seats. As I discussed a little earlier, and I don't know how to approach our representative and our state senator about this, but there are areas where we need some bullets for our economic gun for fourth-class cities, where we can all sit down as a group and say, hey, let's talk to an investor and let's talk about revitalizing the Strip. Part of the Strip looks like you know what after the tornado, and it's not been redeveloped. Branson Heights Shopping Center, across the street from it, next to me at the old Engler block there, used to be the Travel Lodge. Across the street was the old Holiday Inn. All those rooms over there, they're not generating any revenue. And it's just not something we need to continue to see. So I would hope that part of our discussions that you're going to be leading with this, with the senator and state representatives, are ways for us to be able to move this community forward, because you can only cut so much for so many years. Then you're at the point in time where we promised police cars would be on their time. The fire station would be built. The police station would be built. I've hammered that long enough. I think that we've got the intestinal fortitude behind this board that we can push forward on some of those things, but we don't see some additional economic development. This is going to be a tough road to hoe in 23, 24.
Yep.
And I appreciate you taking that on.
Thank you for that. We have a motion and a second. We ready to vote?
Time to push the button and get the ribs.
Let's vote.
No ribs. Oh, how about brisket? I don't see the vote button yet.
Is the vote button?
Let's do roll call. My vote button's
Let's
working.
do roll call.
Button don't work.
Alderman Demon,
Yes.
Alderman Skanes,
Aye.
Alderman Cooper,
Yes.
Alderman Fenton,
Yes.
Alderman Whitus,
You betcha.
Alderman C.
Yes.
That motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. I don't know if it's on your notes or not, but we were going to ask for a double read on this since we've talked about it in detail. What are your thoughts?
If we didn't do a double read now, would it be on this coming Tuesdays?
So I'm out of
Board of
town
Aldermen?
next week. If we can do the consent on December 14th, that would be fine for me, but since we hammered it so much, I was wondering if the double read was going to be appropriate for you all. It's totally up to you, but I felt the need to ask.
I would make
Lem-
that motion to go ahead and have the double read.
Let me just throw out a question. Sure. In recent HR meeting, we talked about the value of having directors, having assistants, where if they were unavailable, city doesn't come to a halt, and they would have somebody fill in.
Sure.
So I know we have a motion and a second on the floor. Before we vote on that, I would like to consider putting this on the agenda at the Board of Aldermen meeting that you won't be attending, and having your assistant be available to answer any questions.
It'll be the number 3 in our office, and that's no problem. However, we just didn't plan for that. So just so you know that when we discussed about that, we are cross-trained in our department because we have to be. We've got about 3, sometimes even 4 deep in our position. So I am 100% on the succession planning and the cross-training. I'm all in on that with you, but we didn't plan on that this time. So my number 2 will also be out. However, I could do number 3, no problem, if you wanted to. But I would prefer a double read if you all are so inclined.
Seems like the easiest way to get this done.
I know when we talked at HR, things happen, right? And so I think that was a very healthy discussion we had about having some backups.
It's important.
Alderman Skanes, you're suggesting the,
Let's go ahead and take a vote and see where it goes one way or another. We need to either approve it today or next Tuesday?
Tuesday.
I hate to not have her here. I really do.
That also, in HR, that issue came up because we have personnel here that don't feel like they can take their time off, that we want them taking because we're so dependent on them. So that was the discussion at HR.
It wouldn't be on next Tuesdays, would it? It wouldn't be enough time.
It would go on next Tuesday because by code, it goes to the next consent. But if you want to just motion to postpone the final reading and move it to when Jamie's back, we can do that.
Or just a double read today.
I say we take this vote. I don't know what else we can really discuss.
I was going to say, what else is there to this?
Yeah, we beat this to death.
Let's knock it out. Call for the question.
Call for the question.
What is the question? What is the meaning of life?
We have a motion and a second for getting approval for a double read on this item.
Do we have a button this time?
Ready to vote? Roll call vote?
Alderman Denham,
Yes.
Alderman Skanes.
Yes.
Alderman Cooper,
Yes.
Alderman Fenton,
Yes.
Alderman Whitus,
Yes.
Alderman C.
Yes.
That motion passed.
So we have
6-0.
approval. Thank you. We have a motion, so we have an approval for the second read. Now I would entertain a motion for the second reading.
Motion to approve on the final read.
Oh, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the audience?
Your Honor, if I could get that on the floor, please. I need to put that on the floor, that we have the first reading of bill number 6. So this motion is on the floor,
Yes.
sorry. Bill number 6064, an ordinance adopting, this is the final reading of bill number 6064, an ordinance adopting a budget, a capital program, personnel evaluation adjustments, and reserve policy for the city of Branson, Missouri for the fiscal year January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2022. So this is, motion was open to approve the final reading of bill number 6064. We are good with a motion by Alderman C. and a second by Alderman Whitus on that. Just catching up, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the audience? Any questions from the board? Let's vote.
Alderman Denham,
Yes.
Alderman Skanes,
Yes.
Alderman Cooper,
Yes.
Alderman Fenton,
Yes.
Alderman Whitus,
Yes.
Alderman C.
Yes.
That motion carried 6-0, thank you.
Thank you all.
Daddy sing bass?
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank
Daddy
you.
sing tenor.
The only other item on the agenda is reports. Madam Clerk, are those Alderman reports?
That would be up to, however you would want to handle that.
Well, I'd like to get out of here within an hour so we could say we did. If the agenda item is reports, and that's intended to be Alderman reports, then are there any reports from the Alderman? Or Stan? Stan, do you have something?
I just wanted to tell you all real quickly that the fire has been contained.
Oh,
It did apparently, and don't quote me on this, but it did apparently take down 3 buildings. But they do have it under control, is my understanding, and they've also had to stamp out a lot of spot fires because of the high winds.
Do we know how it started, or?
It started at that pork rind shop. I'm not sure how. And it spread to the furniture store.
Wood carving shop.
And then, yeah, the wood carving shop, and then to another building. But those 3 buildings were a loss, is my understanding, but Silver Dollar City plans on being open tomorrow.
Wow.
that's great. Any other reports? Hearing none, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
All in favor?
For the record, this meeting lasted 58 minutes.
Unreal. Unreal.
We need a vote to adjourn. Roll call?
Just go. All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Anybody opposed? I double dog